welcome to Her Wild Side Hockey Podcast. I am your hostess, Mikki. As you can see, if you're watching on video, I am still in my makeshift studio, aka my bedroom, except I blurred the background because you guys don't want to see all of that. You don't care. I'm going to be ordering my own green screen so I can set up kind of what I had before here. But either way, welcome to the 2 days of the NHL offseason, except not really because there are already a bunch of trades happening. So there is no offseason this year, which is actually, that was the title of the episode I put out on Sunday. I don't know. All the days blur together for me. But yeah, so even though we are in the offseason, there is still so much happening because we just finished the Stanley Cup Finals last night. And let me tell you guys, Game 7 did not disappoint. The whole final series was so much fun to watch. I'm sure you all watched it, so I'm not going to sit here and rehash everything. But I am going to say, amazing win by Florida. 30 years in the making. Good for them. As a Wild fan who, we're getting to 20 plus years in the league and not getting there, I understand how Florida fans felt. So, I'm hoping maybe that's the start of let's get other teams like the Wild to the Stanley Cup Finals. But just watching the celebration, I think, is the best part because even though I wasn't technically rooting for either team, I was just kind of here for the hockey. The celebration is still just so emotional. Watching the Tkachuk family and first just seeing them up in the stands, Keith crying, Brady was so excited. And thinking back to last year when they are coming to the end of the Stanley Cup Finals, Matthew is so banged up that Brady has to literally help him out of bed and make sure that he's breathing while he's taking a nap. Brady was there and he was there for all of that and he saw all that heartbreak. And so having him be there again this year and seeing how emotional he got, what a great family. How awesome, amazing was that? And the first person that I really got emotional about was Kyle Okposo, a Minnesota boy. I always love a Minnesota boy playing, especially when they win the cup. He was the 13th U of M Minnesota Golden Gopher hockey player to lift the cup. And knowing that he has worked so hard, I think it's 17 years. I'm sitting here trying to do math now. Either way, he has been working so hard. And I know there's plenty of people that are always going to harsh the vibe, right? And they're going to be mad about Okposo leaving or about Okposo playing better in Florida. But you know what? While he hasn't said it, most likely this feels like it's going to be a retirement for him. For the Buffalo Sabres to respect him so much that they help him go to Florida, the team that he really wanted to go to, that they traded him there so that he could win a cup before he's done. That's one of those things where hockey is beautiful, that it's the wonderful game, just having that much respect for a player is so touching to me. And I think it says volumes about the Buffalo organization. And I was reading back over Okposo's past and the things that he has dealt with. And I did not realize the concussion and the neurological problems that he had kind of stemming from that. And to the point where he was manic, he was in the hospital, he could barely talk. And to see him now having come back and now all the way to the Stanley Cup, out there with his wife and his 4 kids, good for him. Watching Sergei Bobrovsky lift that cup. He's another one, he is somewhere around my age, and so I know what it feels like to be this age. Obviously, I'm not a pro athlete, but, I know what it feels like to have aged some. I know what it feels like to, be like from high school until now, and how long of a time that is, and to wait that long. And Bobrovsky really, during overall in the playoffs, he played pretty well. At the beginning of the final series, he played really well. He fell apart a little, wasn't totally his fault, but he was the one that really captured that final game, I feel. He just kind of locked everything down. He let in one shot. That was it. And then Paul Maurice. Now I'm trying to remember. Of course, I always remember things as I'm recording and not before to go look it up. But he had been talking about his son. I believe his son won the championship in one of the leagues. That bear with me, folks. Here, you know what? I'm going to pause and I'm going to go look at it. Okay, I did my research like a good podcaster. So when Paul Maurice moved to Florida, his son moved with them, and he was working as a broadcaster for the ECHL team, the Florida Everblades. Sorry, reading. And they won the championship 2 years in a row now. And so Paul Maurice had kind of said, like, well, now I need a Stanley Cup so I can win something too. And he is such a funny coach. And he's one of those coaches that has personality. And I like that when he's being interviewed afterwards on the ice, he really let his emotions come out. And he was very heartfelt in what he said. In a league where so many people, they end up going to those defaults of, we put pucks deep and we, all of the mumbo jumbo that we're used to hearing. It was nice to hear something a little bit different. Now, there's been a little bit of controversy, which there shouldn't be, about the Conn Smythe. Connor McDavid absolutely deserved the Conn Smythe. As people are pointing out, he broke a Wayne Gretzky record. That is not something that happens often. That is not something that like every year someone's going to break a record. No. Wayne Gretzky has had records that he's held for dozens of years. And for McDavid to come along and break a record and basically drag his team through the entire Stanley Cup final rounds, he basically drug his team to the Game 7. And you know what? They lost. Yes. And people are saying, well, if it's the most valuable player, then they should have won. Okay. You know what? That's not how it works. It's not. They're saying who was the best overall. It's not who won it all. And it's the same thing. I'm going to talk a little bit later about the Calder, and we have touched on this before. The Calder is not for the player that's going to end up being a superstar. The Calder is supposed to be who was the best this season. So Conn Smythe, who was the best this playoffs? It was McDavid. And you know what? If you want to be I just can't. You know what? I can't with people. And then they complained that he didn't come out to get the award. You know what? He's back in the locker room with his teammates. They are grieving for this championship that they were so close to winning. And before he left the ice, he was the first one to go down the handshake line. And he was not just good game, good game, good game. He was talking to every single other player. And you could see that he was genuinely congratulating them. And to be fair, the Panthers were doing the same back to him because you know what? He's a tough guy to play against. And they were sincerely saying that, he had done a good job and he had played well, and he did try really hard. So for him to not come out, would you want to? Would you want to go out there and grab this award that in that moment in time is not going to matter to you? I'm sure further on in McDavid's career or when he's retired, I'm sure that he'll be very proud of having won the Conn Smythe. But in that moment in time, it probably felt like a participation ribbon for him. And it was bad enough that people in the audience were booing. That's so tasteless. So tasteless. Like, your team already won. You don't have to boo Connor McDavid. Now, maybe people were booing Gary Bettman because obviously that's a thing, but they didn't boo at the beginning of his little speech. They only booed when he got to the Connor McDavid part. And so if that was you, I just want you to know that you should maybe sit with yourself a little bit and think about how to be a classier fan for next season. We are going to shift gears here. I'm going to do my little Ticketmaster read, except I changed things here and all right, here. So one of the ways you can support Her Wild Side Hockey Podcast is through Ticketmaster. If you are purchasing tickets for any sporting events, theatrical production, concert, whatever it is you want to do this summer with your 2 full days of NHL offseason, then we would love if you would use our link. I have a QR code up if you are watching the video, and we always have a link in the show notes. And again, we are just looking mostly to recoup costs of what we put out to produce these shows, and we appreciate anything and everything that people are willing to do to help, like using the QR code. QR, I can talk. Okay, back at it. So 30 minutes before the Stanley Cup Finals are going to start, all of a sudden, Linus Ullmark traded to the Senators. And this was one of those things where, like, people knew it was coming. And I kind of hope that the GMs waited just to kind of announce it then, to just needle Bettman a little bit. Just to be like, you know what? This is going to stick in his craw. Let's do it. But it's just the goalie carousel is still turning and spinning. And for Minnesota Wild fans, that means that that's one more team that doesn't need a goalie anymore. They are not in the goalie contention anymore. So the Senators are done. Who else? The Devils were out now. Trying to think of who else. But either way, I'm going to go back and I'm going to say one more time what I think about this goalie issue. I understand that people want Wallstedt to come up and play in the NHL. Yes, me too. Absolutely. I want him to get some mentoring from Fleury. I want him to get more experience at the NHL level and against harder teams. But by next fall, by the beginning of next season, Fleury is turning 40 and Wallstedt is 22. So between those two, who is going to play 50 games? If you try and play Fleury for 50 games, he's going to burn out. Guys, he's going to be 40. It's a fact. Even though he is in incredible shape and he still plays really well, it will burn him out to play 50 games. Wallstedt, on the other hand, if he is, I don't want to say forced, if he is playing 50 NHL games, you are taking your new star goalie and absolutely just chucking him into the fire. And that feels like a really great way to ruin it. That feels like a really great way to completely wreck his confidence. And it feels like a good way to make him doubt himself and his abilities. So I feel like the best solution that can happen here is to have 3 goalies. Not all the time. That does not mean always having all 3 goalies there. What it means is Gustafsson is still young. He is young enough, and he played a whole extra month with Team Sweden and looked good in the tournament. He looked good. And you know what? He's going to work on his conditioning over the summer. He knows that. He was very open with the fact that he knows what he has to work on, and I bet that he will, because he is a professional athlete. So if he comes back and he has gotten over his sophomore slump, then he can play the 50 games. And then what you can do is you can give, another good chunk to Fleury, and then pull Wallstead up from Iowa and give him some chunks of games here and there. Wallstead is still signed to an ELC. Pulling him up is not that much to add to the salary cap situation, because we already know it's tight. We have one more year, but it's not like you're trying to find room for $4 million. You're finding room for it's something around 800 to 900,000. That's a different story. You can find that in the salary cap. I think that's the best way to go about it. I feel like that will also help give Gustafsson maybe a little more confidence that he lost last year. As long as everyone in front stays healthy, I think this is really the only way to have all three of those goalies. I feel like that's the only way to have a successful year goaltending wise. I think it's also one of those situations where a lot of players go through the sophomore slump. It's a real thing. It's one of those things where, you have all this pressure, you signed a big contract, you get on the ice, and maybe you're okay for a little bit, but then something happens, you make a stupid play, or there's a game that just goes completely sideways, and then the doubt starts to come in. Because now it's not, oh, am I a good player? It's, oh my God, am I actually worth $7 million? Can I play to that ability? For Gustafsson, am I a goaltender worth $4 million? I bet he didn't. I bet he felt like he wasn't last year. But if he can come back in and gain that confidence, now we've got a Gustafsson-Wallstead tandem once Fleury retires after this season. I feel like that is the best situation that we can have. All right, I'm going to throw it to one more ad before we kind of talk about what's coming up in the next couple of days. So bear with me, and I'll be back in a minute.
Thank you for watching the show. If you enjoy our podcast and want to support the show, consider signing up for ESPN Plus via our link at insidetherink.com/ESPN, or scan the QR code on your screen now. I have ESPN Plus, and I personally love all the college sports, UFC, MLB, and NHL games all across ESPN platforms. Over 1,000 out-of-market NHL games are on ESPN Plus every year. Make sure you hit the QR code or go to insidetherink.com/ESPN to make sure you don't miss out on any of this year's NHL action. And if that wasn't enough for you, ESPN Plus is currently offering a bundle of ESPN Plus, Disney Plus, and Hulu for $14.99 a month. You get sports, the kids get Disney, and Hulu is the added bonus. It's the perfect bundle. I personally have it, and I don't know what you would do without it.
Welcome back. This last little chunk of the show today is just about what is coming up. First of all, with the podcast, I've talked about how there's going to be some things changing. I am going to be just tweaking a few things, maybe looking to get a little more, I don't want to say professional, but just, all the fun little tags and stuff, which right now I'm basically a one-woman show. And as a mom who works, I just don't have time to figure everything out. But I do have someone who is going to help me. So that will be good. I'm looking into launching some new merch this summer. So just keep an eye on that. Obviously, I'll be talking about that. I'm looking to kind of ramp up my social media presence a little. Just a lot of things that I'm trying not to overwhelm myself with, right? But as for the Minnesota Wild, what's coming up? Well, let's see. Wednesday, we have the NHL awards. However, we don't have anybody up for any of those. But Thursday, they will announce the Calder Trophy. And as I mentioned before, you know what? We know Connor Bedard is going to win. We know that. And is he a good player? Obviously. He is going to be a superstar. He's great at scoring. But it is a bummer that Brock Faber, who was objectively better in his role as a defenseman, isn't going to win when he was more valuable to his team. Just going to let it sit there. They're also going to announce the all-rookie team at some point. It would not be a surprise if both Faber and Rossi made the all-rookie team. And from what I remember, Rossi, I believe, gets a bonus if he makes the team. And I mean, I guess I don't know. I don't vote on these things, but I would have put them both on there because at one point Faber and Rossi were the only ones dragging the Minnesota Wild through their season. Then obviously starting on Friday night, we have the NHL draft. Minnesota currently has a first-round pick at number 13. From everything that I've been reading and I've been listening to, it would not be a surprise to see the Minnesota Wild trade down because 13 is kind of that mushy middle. By that point, all the best of the best have been taken. And by 13, it's just, obviously you're still going to get a good player, right? That's not the issue. But seeing kind of a lot of the prospects that we already have lots of good prospects in the system. Maybe what we need is to see what we can get for the first round pick. So that would not be a surprise. We'll see. And then on Monday, free agency starts. And that day is always crazy, just like trade deadline, but it's crazy in the most exciting way. Things that I'm looking out for Minnesota, not necessarily in just from now through, the next week or so, would be, I know that the Jake Middleton extension is something that's been teased a lot. People have been saying they're looking at 4x4 for him, and which absolutely, I think Middleton needs to stick around. He's got a great personality. He can play up and down the defensive lineup. And he's shown that he can play with Spurgeon. He can play with Faber. He can play. So that, I love that. And also I've been hearing that Declan Chisholm is going to be re-signed, which is great. The only thing I don't like about that is simply that fills the 7 slots. And that means that some of the other UFAs, like Dakota Mermis, will probably have to be signed somewhere else. Although at the same time, good for Mermis because he was pulled up and played 40 plus games in the NHL this year and really came to show that, you know what, I am an NHL defenseman. So I am really happy for him in that aspect. And I hope that he gets a good contract somewhere. And then Brock Faber is eligible to sign an extension too. And I was just reading this morning that apparently they have not even talked about that. But I also don't think that that's going to be a big struggle because Faber loves Minnesota Wild. The Minnesota Wild love Faber. We all kind of know what he's going to get anyway. So I think it just comes to the point where at some point they just have to sit down and be like, okay, let's just spell it out. I know that the Minnesota Wild are trying to look for some kind of a winger to put in to basically push Marcus Johansson a little bit further down on the lineup and maybe pair with Zuccarello. Zuki is a great playmaker, but he needs someone with him that can score. And Johansson just wasn't that. There's names being shuffled around and, I don't have any inside, knowledge about that, but it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure that they'll pick up somebody for just a 1 year contract because, like I said, this is our last year in salary cap hell. Starting next year, we can kind of throw around bigger bucks. Not a ton though, because we got to sign Kirill at that point. We got to sign, and we got lots of prospects. So that's a lot coming up. And I'm going to enjoy the next 2 days unless Bill Guerin really puts on his thinking cap and makes some trades. Who knows? But yeah, so until then, I guess I will wrap up this episode of the pod. So thanks for sticking with me. I'm excited to kind of get into some more fun things over the summer now that the finals are done and once free agency kind of opens and then settles down a little bit. So be on the lookout. And you can always find me. I mostly hang out on Twitter/X under Hockey She Wrote. I do have a Facebook page. I do have an Instagram. I'm not there a lot, but we'll see. Anyway. All right. I love you all. You all have a place in hockey. Hockey is for everyone. And I hope you all know that. Have a great day.